So if you're going to do a hip hop 50th anniversary and you're going to call hip hop to it, you have to have hip hop there. Hip hop was not there.
No, hip hop was not there.
Rappers were there. Very respected rappers were there. But it wasn't hip hop. Because hip hop would have got on that mic the Grammys. You
exactly. They would have said F the Grammys because you guys didn't respect us before. Like Rodney Dangerfield said, no respect. They didn't respect them. So why in the world would you come in after all these years, after 49 years, and then you finally decide to invite me? You finally decide to say, oh, okay, you guys can come in. When hip-hop is literally the most popular genre in the world. Everybody and their mama now likes hip-hop in some way, shape, or form. KRS-One is a legend in the hip-hop world. A prolific and prodigious lyricist in a generation. One of the most popular. One of the reasons why I opened up with his interview with that young lady, speaking about how culture is created, is that I think it is important for us to listen to each other, those of us who are older and younger alike. Just because you are younger does not mean I cannot learn anything from you. Just because we are older doesn't mean that you cannot learn anything from us, and doesn't mean that all of our ideas are antiquated. Those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it, and those of us who do not listen to the younger people, we are not hip to what is new, so that we can be able to keep up with the trends that are going on today. So I think that's really important, and I appreciate KRS-One for bringing that point out. That's literally one of my favorite pieces of an interview that he has stated. So I really appreciate that from him. While I think that's also important, there was an interview by KRS-One that was done as of recently that I think is also really important. And I think this importance is, it really is deep, because once you start to see what he's saying, you start to realize that hip hop has been really exploited over the years, and it goes deep, especially in regards to what he states in this interview. For reasons that I am already demonetized, I can, I guess, go over this. So I think that's why I'm not so, I'm not. The video is just removed. The video that I had up that I was going to share was just removed. Really? This is some semblance of what he talks about. All right, let's see.
rappers were there. Very respected rappers were there. But it wasn't hip hop. Because hip hop would have got on that mic and said, fuck the Grammys. You dissed us for 49 years now. That would have been in a rhyme.
Earlier today, rap legend KRS-One went off on the Grammys Hip Hop 50th tribute. That's right, y'all. In a recent interview released earlier today, KRS-One explained why he turned down the invite to perform at the Grammys Hip Hop 50th tribute. Of course, KRS-One took the invite as disrespect, saying that the Grammys waited 50 years to finally give hip-hop its proper respect and acknowledgement. Now, remember, in the beginning, when the Grammys first, revealed the hip hop category, they didn't even want to put that part on television. All right. At first, they were going to call it the pre-show. They were asking artists to show up to the event a couple hours early. You know what I mean? That's how disrespectful they were to hip hop. And here we are, 50 years later. They got Will Smith, right, finishing the night, performing "Summertime" with all the legends behind. How convenient, right, for Will Smith, saying just over a year ago, he pretty much was blackballed by Hollywood, as they would say, over the Chris Rock slap. So I can understand why Will accepted the invite to perform at the Grammys.
So my thing is that from the video, one of the first things that I took from KRS-One that he said was that he said he is what you would call a hip-hop extremist. He said not extremist in a violent sense, but more of an extremist as purity. And there's this purity that he embraces within hip-hop. Basically, one of the things, and people are talking about how it's disrespectful, how hip-hop has, it's been, for the last 49 years, the Grammys have turned their back on hip-hop. And now, when it's in its 50th year, now they want to have hip-hop in for commercial success. When in reality, it was a means to exploit the culture in order to have more advertisers. This is what the Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, also known as the Grammys, this is what they're about. And who really is the mainstays, the powers that be behind the Grammys? It would be the big record labels. These are the people that are behind it. So they really just wanted to make more money off of hip hop without actually giving it its just due over the last 50 years. And so this is some of the things that people like KRS-One were referring to. I would like to be able to react to it, but they took the entire interview down. Because I guess it was such a firestorm, right? Because basically KRS-One said, F the Grammys. And truth be told, I'm going to be honest with you, I agree with him. Because the thing is that if you're not going to embrace the culture, then therefore you don't get to praise it and have it at its height. Hip hop is literally the biggest genre now around the world. It's the most popular genre in the world of music today because of its counterculture. And hip hop was actually implemented because it spoke about the struggle of especially Black people as a marginalized people within our communities. And so because of its inception, and you can talk about, the implementation of it with Grandmaster Flash and DJ Kool Herc and how it came about in New York. All this actually came about because of the struggle. And so a lot of us who grew up around it, especially, and if you know, people like my brothers especially are hip hop heads. They will talk about how, when you talk about the purity of it, and the purity of it is really in the struggle. And so instead of embracing that, they decided to exploit it, but they shunned it for the last 49 years. So that's basically what they talked about. It's kind of ironic that Will Smith was part of this tribute and how he essentially closed it out. because he was the first rapper to ever win a Grammy, because he was what they considered acceptable in regards to hip hop. And the funny part is they never actually gave their just due to the Eric B's, the Rakims, the Chuck D's, and the Public Enemies. They never gave it to KRS-One. Why? Because they actually were counterculture to the system that put Black people in the position that they're in. That is the reason for it. Because when you go according to the rappers that were actually more conscious, that didn't necessarily go the route of the gangster rap, then of course that was counter to the systems that they wanted to keep in place in order for us to stay subject to the systems that we have. So I would like to continue with this. We'll just see where this goes.
Hip hop 50th performance, man. Like I said, it's just unfortunate because there are some of our artists, right, the OGs, the legends, who never got the opportunity to perform at the Grammys. So this was their big moment, right? After all of the years of hard work and sacrifice, no matter where you work in your field, you want to be acknowledged, for the hard work. And this is how situations like this pit our people against each other. So even back.
So this says Kool Moe Dee, by them already an elder statesman in hip hop. The irony was we were boycotting at a time they were finally acknowledging us.
Back then, when the initial boycott started, I'm pretty sure, all of the artists, I'm pretty sure they weren't all in favor of the boycott. I'm pretty sure some were like, what, let's, use this moment, this platform to really, push the message out there so that people can understand what hip hop really means and what it stands.
So one of the things I also wanted to bring out, and I'm remembering some pieces from the interview, was that KRS-One was LL Cool J actually begged KRS-One to attend, and KRS-One said no, because he said he's such a hip hop purist that he cannot attend an event where there is no hip hop. They did not embrace truly the DJing, the MCing, the breaking, as well as the graffiti. They did not truly embrace it. They were not going to truly embrace it. He said there were rappers there, but hip hop wasn't there. So that was one of the things that he actually talked about. It's sad that interview was actually taken down. I'm actually pretty pissed about it, to be honest with you, because it was such a wonderful interview, and I wish that person had kept it up, but I'm not exactly sure as to why. So yeah, let me go into this as well, because the reason being that I also wanted to bring this up is because KRS-One really connected the dots, especially to the exploitation. And one of the things that I also wanted to do was share this, because a lot of people do not talk about this enough as far as the exploitation of hip hop. And I'm sure a few of you have probably spoke about this. But this is actually talking about how Crazy Bone exposes private prisons that are linked to rap music. I think this is also really important. I think this also kind of goes in line with what KRS-One was saying about the exploitation of hip hop, and how really it's just overly commercialized nowadays. And when it comes to the people who are elder statesmen within hip hop, one of the things that they don't do is that they don't pay attention to the people who actually talk about consciously about what hip hop was really built upon, which was talking about the struggle that has been so prolific in the early days. And it was considered dangerous because of the consciousness that hip hop had back when it first began. So I think that's also really important. So let's go into this. And then there's an article that's corresponding to this that I would like to get into. So
the letter is the secret meeting that changed rap music and destroyed a generation.
Damn.
So it says, hello. After more than 20 years, I finally decided to tell the world what I witnessed in 1991, which I believe was one of the biggest turning points in popular music and ultimately American society. I have struggled for a long time weighing the pros and cons of making my story public, as I was reluctant to implicate the individuals who were present that day. So I've simply decided to leave out the names and all the details that may risk my personal well-being and that of those who were, like me, dragged into something they weren't ready for.
Damn.
Hold on, let me
So we gonna tell a story.
we gonna tell the story. We ain't scared.
You know what I'm saying? What they gonna do?
They after us, not just playing.
Look, that black van.
So look, so he says between the late 80s and early 90s, I was what you may call a decision maker with one of the more established companies in the music industry. I came to Europe in the early 80s and quickly established myself in the business. The industry was different back then, since technology and media weren't accessible to people like that, like they are today. The industry had more control over the public and had the means to influence them any way it wanted.
Right.
This may explain why in early 1991, I was invited to attend a closed-door meeting with a small group of business insiders to discuss rap music's new direction. Rap music's new direction.
Yeah.
Little did I know we would be asked to participate in one of the most unethical and destructive business practices ever seen.
Crazy.
So this was the meeting. The meeting was held at a private residence on the outskirts of Los Angeles.
So first of all, one of the things I want to get into is you guys have to remember one thing. In regards to record labels, they are corporations, and corporations have agendas. And with these corporations, ultimately, they are basically stuck on exploitation. So they, like I always say, they always have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to make and extract as much money as they possibly can. And they want, in order for their money to go long, they have to have industry shaking hands with each other in order to create something that is almost like an automatic effect, right? So as far as what Crazy Bone is reading in this letter is really starting to bring out how really our media companies are tied to what is going on within the hip hop industry. And when we talk about corporate media is also involved in music. And so I think that a lot of people just do not put this into perspective. They don't think about this until it's brought out. And so corporate media also means music. So whenever that new song comes out that's really, really popular, it's not always by just coincidence that, oh, well, it's a really great song and that's how it has popular success. A lot of times it's because it's pushed out at us as well. So that just goes to show what the corporate media is about. So let's continue and let's get into this.
I remember about 25 to 30 people were being there.
Right.
Most of them familiar faces. Speaking of those I knew, we joked about the theme of the meeting, as many of us did not care for rap and failed to see the purpose of being invited to a private meeting to discuss the future of hip hop.
Talk to him.
Among the attendees was a small group of unfamiliar faces who stayed to themselves and made no attempt to socialize beyond their circle. Based on their behavior and formal appearances, they didn't seem to be from our industry. Our casual, chatter was interrupted when we were asked to sign the confidentiality agreement, preventing us from publicly discussing the information presented during the meeting. Needless to say, this intrigued, in some cases, disturbed many of us. The agreement was only a page long, but very clear on matters and consequences, which stated that violating the terms would result in job termination immediately.
So that's how you know things were serious, because they were basically saying, if you say anything that was said in this room, you're losing your job. You will never work in this town again. I think that's an important point to also bring out, is that it's like, well, what's so sensitive that it would destroy the narrative that they're trying to create? Has to be something negative. Can't be anything positive, really. So, yeah. I got you, Roger. Let's continue.
We asked several people what this meeting was about and the reason for such secrecy, but could not find anyone who had the answers for us. A few people refused to sign and walked out. Nobody stopped them. I was tempted to follow, but curiosity got the best of me.
That's right.
A man who was part of the unfamiliar group collected all the agreements from us. So now it's going to get to the good part, because the meeting about to start.
Talk to him, Jake.
It says, quickly after the meeting began, hold on one second.
Get your popcorn, y'all.
Popcorn, get your pistol. No,
For real though.
Quickly after this meeting began, one of the industry colleagues, who shall remain nameless like everybody else, thanked us for attending. He then gave the floor to a man who only introduced himself by first name and gave no other details about his personal background. I think he was the owner of the residence, but that was never confirmed. He briefly praised all of us for the success we had achieved in our industries and congratulated us for being selected as part of this small group of decision makers. At this point, I began to feel slightly uncomfortable and the strangeness of this gathering. The subject quickly changed as the speaker went on to tell us that the respective companies we represented had invested in a very profitable industry, which could become even more rewarding with our active involvement.
Damn.
He explained that the companies we worked for had invested millions into the building of privately owned prisons, and that our positions of influence in the music industry would actually impact the profitability of these investments. Then he says, I remember many of us in the group immediately looking at each other in awe and confusion. At the same time, I didn't know what a private prison was, but I wasn't the only one. Sure enough, someone asked what these prisons were and what any of this had to do with music. We were told that these prisons were built by privately owned companies who received funding from the government based on the number of inmates. The more inmates, the more the government would pay these prisons. It was also made clear to us that since these prisons are privately owned, as they become publicly traded, we'd be able to buy shares. Most of us were taken back by this. Again, a couple of people asked what this had to do with us. At this point, my industry colleague who had first opened the meeting took the floor again and answered our questions. He told us that since our employees had become silent investors in this prison business, it was now in their interest to make sure that these prisons remain filled.
Did you hear that? It's within the interests to keep these prisons filled. There is a perversion of hip hop that is pushed in order to keep this vicious cycle going. Always remember, all forms of media face propaganda. Music is no different. Just like you have the military industrial complex that is involved with a lot of movies. Like, for instance, there was the military industrial complex involved in Top Gun, and the Top Gun sequel that they had, I think was last year. They literally had military recruiters outside the movie theaters trying to recruit young people into joining the military. It is no different within our music as well, to push a certain narrative in order to keep profitability in certain industries within this country, to keep the perpetuation of exploitation going. This is the link between capitalism and hip-hop. Not that hip-hop thrives off of capitalism, but capitalism will pervert the use of hip-hop in order to keep itself going by means of exploiting people who look like me. This is going deep. Let's continue.
Our job would be to help make this happen by making music which promote criminal behavior, rap being the music of choice. He assured us that this would be a great situation for us because rap music was becoming an increasingly profitable market for our companies, and as employees, we'd also be able to buy stocks in these prisons. Immediately, silence came over the room.
By the way, just to let you guys know, they could have did this for Outlaw Country. They could have did this for outlaw country music and tried to fill their private prisons with poor white folks. But they didn't. They used hip hop. Why? Because it was a big emerging market that they wanted to get their hold of. They saw the potential of it becoming massive. That's why. Also, because you can go after and exploit black people easier than you can white people. Because we're still a minority. And it's easy to paint us as the villain because they've been doing it for so long already.
You could have heard a pin drop. I remember looking around to make sure I wasn't dreaming and saw half of the people with dropped jaws. My daze was interrupted when someone shouted, "Is this a fucking joke?" At this point, things became chaotic.
Right.
Two of the men who were part of the unfamiliar group grabbed the man who shouted and attempted to remove him from the house. A few of us, myself included, tried to intervene. One of them pulled out a gun, and we all backed off. They separated.
That's how you know shit is serious. That's how you know. When somebody gets upset and then firearms are drawn. This is real gangster shit. That's what this is. Make no mistake about it. The real gangsters are people in corporate America. The real gangsters are people that are in $10,000 Italian suits that got yachts. They're billionaires that you don't even know their names, that they don't want you to know who they are. Those are the gangsters. Those are the ones that are actually exploiting us. Boy, I'm telling you, peep game.
Separated us from the crowd, and all four of us was escorted outside. My industry colleague who opened up the meeting earlier hurried out to meet us and reminded us that we had signed an agreement and would suffer the consequences of speaking out about this publicly, or even those who attended the meeting.
Damn.
I asked him, why was he involved with something so corrupt? And he replied, it's bigger than the music business and nothing we can do. And no, it's bigger than the music business and nothing we want to challenge without risking consequences. We are protesting.
What kind of consequences? What kind of consequences? You want to know? Maybe something having to do with their lives. It's crazy.
Said as we walked back into the house, I remember word for word the last thing he said. It's out of my hands now. Just remember you signed an agreement. He then closed the door behind him. The men rushed us to our car and actually waited until we drove off the property.
Now, just to let you guys know, here's the thing. They signed an agreement. Who owns the courts? You see, when you own the system, you own the legal route. You own the courts. You own the presidency. You own the Senate. You own the House. So therefore, if the corporations own it, who do you go to? Because if you own the legal route, you can't go the legal route. Or if you try to go the legal route, then guess what? You get shut down every single time. This is why, that's why you can have them sign an NDA. You can have them sign these contracts. And then guess what? Something happens. Well, you signed a contract. So I'm not going to finish this entire video, but I already put the link in the chat. But that's what it links to that meeting back in 91, over 30 years ago. So let me share this with you guys as well, because I did find some of the interview of KRS-One, and I really want to share this with you guys. Thank God for people on TikTok. So let's see.
Okay.
Let's get this going so we can hear some of this too. So I really, really wanted to get into this.
Never will you ever see me standing in the environment where our culture is being exploited. Or if you do see me there, the next moment this thing's gonna fall. I'm there to bring this shit down. If you see me in a situation like that, you should say, yo, watch out. Something's about to happen. Turn your cameras on. Something's about to go down. Why is Chris here? Why is he here? Something's about to, he gonna say some shit right now that is gonna, Having said that, so when I got the call, I immediately saw, First of all, it's the Grammys. You get no respect here. None. You have no respect here. Now, we respect your existence. We know you exist. And we know that you're the Grammys. We understand that. And we respect that, your existence. But you ignored hip hop for 49 years. At the 5th 50th year you want to call us? 49 years you ignored us. The 50th year, that's when you call. You couldn't even call on 47 and gear it up to at least 50, okay? At least get us into 47. No. You wait till the 50th year to want to call hip hop's authentic teacher? Nah, you don't get that privilege. I refuse to show up. Y'all go ahead and play games with yourselves. The last part that I did see of this thing, and I haven't seen the show, so I can't judge everything. But, you know, see, I don't want to say nobody's name, but I'm just saying, if we know, let me put it this way. If we know, okay, this is truth now, okay? Nobody's opinion, no, forget how we feel, forget theory. If we know for a fact that hip hop is breaking, MCing, graffiti art, and DJing. Now, we can argue these other ones, but we know for certain that what we call hip-hop is breaking, MCing, graffiti art, DJing. We know that. We've all decided on that. We've all agreed on that. Books are written. Documentaries are done. We all know this. So what is all this other stuff?
Commercialization. Co-opting. That's what it is. That's all it is. The take away from the actual message of hip hop which was the struggle. The struggle of an oppressed group to speak the truth about what they go through. To speak our truth. And the struggle doesn't have to be just Black people. This is why you could be white and rap as long as you're speaking about the struggle. Right? This is why we have a lot of Latino rappers now, because they're speaking about the struggle. This is why I showed a few weeks back a little 12-year-old boy in Gaza rapping about what's going on with him in Gaza. But the thing is that ultimately it's about the struggle. That's what it's about. That's what it has been about. The struggle to get out of the streets. The struggle because of what happens in the streets. And the thing is that what happened in the streets is perpetuated by CIA, COINTELPRO, taking away our programs that were implemented by the Black Panther Party, things like that. The fact that we actually had to formulate a Black Panther Party just so that we could be able to protect ourselves and alleviate some of the ills of living in the hood. And then once we try to alleviate those, then it's considered a danger to the entire United States. So then what we had to do, we had to talk about it in music form. And talking about it in music form, and the way that we were doing it was catchy. And it was making people pay attention. RAP is an acronym. Always remember this. RAP is an acronym. It stands for Rhythm and Poetry. It is an art form used to let people know about what the struggle is, how it came about, what it does to us, and also maybe used to inspire us to bring ourselves out of it. This is why you have a lot of conscious rappers that are highly revered. because they tried to get us to think that this doesn't have to be our situation in life. We can actually bring ourselves out of it. So it's a means of catharsis and saying, yes, this is what's going on with us. It makes us think you don't have to go into this realm and stay within this realm. You can bring yourself out as a community collectively. But this also means listening to our revolutionary leaders that also were assisting us in doing this. But that is what the powers that be don't want us to know. So, let's continue.
Like what is this other stuff that you're calling hip hop? That's not hip hop. So if you're going to do a hip hop 50th anniversary and you're going to call hip hop to it, you have to have hip hop there. Hip hop was not there.
No, hip hop was not there.
Rappers were there. Very respected rappers were there. But it wasn't hip hop. Because hip hop would have got on that mic and said, fuck the Grammys. You
exactly. They would have said F the Grammys because you guys didn't respect us before. Like Rodney Dangerfield said, no respect. They didn't respect them. So why in the world would you come in after all these years, after 49 years, and then you finally decide to invite me? You finally decide to say, oh, okay, you guys can come in. When hip hop is literally the most popular genre in the world. Everybody and their mama now likes hip hop in some way, shape, or form. Hell, look. And some people may, like, I could, look, when I was very religious, we would go to gatherings. What was one of the songs that they would play when that got us on the dance floor? Outkast, I like the way you move. Da-da-da. I like the way you move. Right? That's hip hop. But it got everybody and their mama on the dance floor. You start playing Rappers Delight, the hip, the hop, the hip, the hippity hip hop, you don't stop. That would get people out on the dance floor. Why? Because it was catchy. That's hip hop. That's some of the music that's on the precipice of the beginnings. So guess what? It is that popular. Let me continue.
dissed us for 49 years now. That would have been in a rhyme. You motherfuckers are corny. We had that shit going in a freestyle if that was real hip hop. But it wasn't real hip hop, so let y'all go ahead and have fun at a party. That's what it was. It was a party. They had some fun. And we left it at that. They got a chance to broadcast it. There were artists there too, by the way, that needed the exposure too.
That's another point. Because they needed the exposure. Why? Well, remember, the record companies are a business, and they need to get eyes on their artists to make money off of them.
Too, I will say that. There was artists there that got exposed. It was dope. It was dope from that point of view. So respectfully, they did their thing, and I hope it was successful for them, and it looked like it was. But it was not hip hop. And this is what I mean by this as well. If I'm not there, it's not hip hop. And I don't say that arrogantly. I'm not saying that arrogantly. I'm saying it truthfully. I'm the first person to say I am hip hop. I brought the philosophy into existence. I'm hip hop's first teacher. I'm its first philosopher. These are facts. I'm not bragging. I'm not saying that. In fact, a lot of what I'm saying is a burden, to be honest with you, okay? But let's just go with what we know to be the truth. So if you're not dealing with the truth, you ain't dealing with KRS. And they're not dealing with the truth. We know hip hop is breaking into saying graffiti or DJing. So what is all this other stuff y'all doing? There's all this, and not even entertaining with breaking then. Entertaining with graffiti art then. You're not even entertaining a real hip hopper. You're just exploiting the culture so you can sell commercials to a gullible white audience.
Boom. That is what it is. To sell to a gullible audience. And that's what it's all about. And that's what I mean by the exploitation. And that exploitation also is used to further to make us continue down a dangerous trend so that they can keep the prison industrial complex churning. So now that we got that in, gratefully somebody put some of it on TikTok. I wish they could have put a little bit more, but this article here. So this article was interesting. So it says hip hop and prison industrial complex conspiracy revealed. This was back in 2013. It says Golden Underground TV recently released an interview I did with him late last year. I got a bit animated at the end. Only so many interviews in a row I can handle being asked about Chief Keef. My tirade wasn't really about Chief Keef. It was about Gucci Mane or Waka Flocka or any of the acts spontaneously catapulted into stardom by synchronized mass media coverage, despite seemingly universal indifference at the very best regarding their talent, whose arrests, involvement in underage pregnancies, concert shootouts, and facial tattoos dominated the conversation for weeks at a time, with their actual music a mere afterthought, if a thought at all. My tirade was about marketing. It was about media power seeking out the biggest pretend criminal kingpins they can find, many of whom shamelessly adopt the names of actual real-life criminal kingpins like 50 Cent and Rick Ross, and exalting them as the poster children for a culture. It was about an art form reduced to product placement, the selling of a lifestyle, and ultimately a huge ad for imprisonment. This is not my opinion. Last year, Corrections Corporation of America, they since changed their name, the biggest name in the private prison industry, contacted 48 states offering to buy their prisons. One stipulation of eligibility for the deal was particularly bizarre: an assurance by the agency partner that the agency has sufficient inmate population to maintain a minimum of 90% occupancy rate over the term of the contract. Question: what kind of legitimate and ethical measures could possibly be taken to ensure the maintenance of a 90% prison occupancy rate? Let's get into this really quick, because here's the thing a lot of people don't talk about. In the United States, we have the largest prison population in the world. The United States accounts for 5% of the world's population, but we account for 25% of the prison population of the entire world. Out of what, we're now at like 8 billion people in the world. On top of all that, 40% of the prison population in the United States is Black, even though we comprise of only 13% of the population. So is it any wonder as to why the influence of hip hop is being used to undermine our communities, to keep us in a system perpetuating slavery? And yes, slavery still exists, because if you look at the 13th Amendment, it still makes an exception for slavery if you are incarcerated. So they're basically using our music as a means to Pied Piper us into the cells, to Pied Piper our young people back into the cells, because they don't want to listen to KRS-One. They don't want to listen to Chuck D and Public Enemy. They don't want people like that. They don't want people like common sense. They don't want people like them. Why? Because if you have people like that are becoming more prolific within the hip hop industry, then that makes people think, well, I don't want to do these things that's going to put me in the clutches of the prison industrial complex. I'm going to do something for my community that actually builds us up outside of the confines of a capitalist system. See, they want to keep them within that mind of doing these things outside the confines of the law, so that once they do these things outside the confines of the law, then they are actually grabbed, put into the prison industrial complex. So they continuously make products and services for McDonald's and Wendy's and American Airlines and Victoria's Secret, and being paid pennies on the dollar just so that they can make as much profit as they can. Or they can be brought into the prisons and make 12 cents an hour while fighting fires in the wildfires in California. Ultimately, that's what it's about. It is a Pied Piper strategy for our young people to keep them locked up. That's what it's about. And that's what it has been about for about 30 years. And you have a lot of hip-hop purists that have been trying to fight against this, but to no avail, because the powers that be are so powerful within this country, because they own the media. This is why when somebody like Kendrick Lamar talks about what's going on with him, he doesn't get as much prolific play as somebody else, like some of these other new artists that talking about being on some Molly or getting some perks. This is why. And so they don't get as much respect. Not as much respect. Wrong. They get the respect, but they don't get the fame. Let's continue, because this article just slam dunked. It says 2 months later, an anonymous email was sent out to various members of the music and publishing industry, giving an account of the meeting where it was determined that hip-hop music will be manipulated to drive up privatized prison profits. Its author, despite claiming to be a former industry insider, did not provide the names of anyone involved in the plot, nor did he specify by which company he himself was employed. As such, the letter was largely regarded as a fraud for lack of facts. But here are the facts. PBS's Frontline has described the conglomerate that determine what information is disseminated into public as a web of business relationships that now defines America's media and culture. Business relationships. Last year, a mere 232 media executives were responsible for the intake of 277 million Americans, controlling all of the avenues necessary to manufacture any celebrity and incite any trend. Time Warner, as owner of Warner Brothers Recording, among many other record labels, can not only sign an artist to a recording contract, but as the owner of Entertainment Weekly, can see to it that they get on next week's cover. Also, the owner of New Line Cinema, HBO, TNT, they can have their artists cast in a leading role in a film that, when pulled from theaters, will be put on rotation, first on premium, then on basic, then on cable. Now we have streaming services. Without any consideration to the music whatsoever, the artist will already be a star through such monopolies. Also extend into radio stations and networks that air music videos. For consumer, choice is often illusory. Both BET and MTV belong to Viacom, while Hot 97, New York City's top hip-hop station, is owned by MS Communications. Online streaming is controlled by Clear Channel, who also owns rival station Power 105. None of this is exactly breaking news, but when ownership of these media conglomerates is cross-checked with ownership of the biggest names in prison privatization, interesting new facts emerge. And this is the crux of the argument. Here it says, according to the public analysis from Bloomberg, the largest holder of Corrections Corporation of America is Vanguard Group Incorporated. Interestingly enough, Vanguard also holds considerable stake in the media giants determining the country's culture. So, by this very notion, Vanguard not only owns the prison corporations, Vanguard, BlackRock as well, but they also own the major media corporations that disseminate our music. So therefore, it is a vicious cycle to keep hip-hop in a cycle of promoting violence and crime so that, guess what? It keeps our young people in the prisons so they can make more money off of our very lives. So this is it. This is why. This is why KRS-One talked about the exploitation of hip-hop. The perversion of it, which is done by corporations. Capitalism got its clutches on hip-hop 30 years ago because capitalists saw the value of hip-hop and how it could shift an entire generation away from capitalism, but instead they made it so that it leads to capitalism, and they perverted it by implementing the means of pushing young people into that direction. I want to read this too. It says, you may be thinking, well, Vanguard is only the third largest holder in those media conglomerates, which is no guarantee that they're calling the shots. Well, the number one holder of both Viacom and Time Warner is a company called BlackRock. BlackRock is the second largest holder in Corrections Corporation of America, second only to Vanguard, and the sixth largest holder of GEO Group, which is also a private prison group. There are many other startling overlaps in private prison mass media ownership, but two underlying facts become very clear very quickly. The people who own the media are the same people who own private prisons. The exact same people, and using one to promote the other is, or would be, depending on your analysis, very lucrative. Such a scheme would mean some very greedy, racist people. There are facts that back it up too. Prison industry lobbyists developing and encouraging criminal justice policies to advance financial interests have been well documented. The most notorious example of Washington-based American Legislative Council, a policy organization funded by the CCA and GEO, which successfully championed the incarceration promoting truth in sentencing and three-strike sentencing laws. If the motive of the private prison industry were the good-hearted desire to get hold of inmates as quickly as possible for the purpose of sooner successfully rehabilitating them, maintenance of a 90% occupancy rate will be considered a huge failure, not a functioning prerequisite. Not to mention the recidivism rates would not be so high because they would not want these people who have offended to come back. Now, let's go into what is recidivism, because I think this is also another important thing for people to learn, because if you know what this means, then you'll see how this is all connected. So, what is recidivism? According to the dictionary, recidivism says the tendency of a convicted criminal to re-offend. So that is recidivism. So if we're going to look at that, let's look at the recidivism rate, meaning the likelihood of people to re-offend. So I want to share that as well. So this is going to talk about the recidivism rate of 2023. Recidivism, here it says, let me enlarge this too so that everybody can see very well. It says the recidivism rate in the US are some of the highest in the world, with almost 44% of criminals released returning to prison within the first year out. Says different states in the U.S. have different ways of which they measure recidivism, one being the aforementioned Arkansas. States not only different in how measurements of recidivism are carried out, but also how each state rehabilitates inmates and how much support they receive while reintegrating society. This plays an important role in lowering recidivism. The state of Arizona, for example, has a recidivism rate of 36.3%, has sought to provide people who have been convicted of certain crimes to seek a certificate of second chance that assists and improves the individual's chances of attaining housing and employment. So basically, they do not rehabilitate people who are in the system so that they do come back, because they don't want them to stay out of prison. They want them to come back. So that's the issue. Now, as far as that's concerned, that is the system that they perpetuate. The recidivism rate within our country is extremely high. And that also benefits companies like BlackRock and Vanguard. Now, let me go here. Talks about who owns private prison stock. Says the nation's two largest for-profit prisons, Tennessee-based Corrections Corporation of America and Florida-based GEO Group, are publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Other private prison firms include Management and Training Corporation, MTC, Community Education Centers, CEC, and LaSalle Southwest Corrections and Emerald Correctional Management are privately held and thus do not have public stock. As of July 2015, CCA has approximately 117 million shares of stock with the market cap of $4.05 billion, with GEO had issued around 75 million shares with a market cap of $2.76 billion. So who owns the vast majority of stock in these two companies? The answer is not everyday people or individual investors, but rather other corporations, banks, mutual fund management companies, and private equity firms, as well as public employee retirement systems. In fact, around 92.4% of CCA stock was owned by 300 institutional investors, while 91.1% of GEO stock was owned by 272 institutional investors at the end of July of 2015. In some cases, the same institutional investors held stock in both companies. The largest owner of CCA stock was Vanguard Group Incorporated, with 16.79 million shares valued at $578.9 million, followed by Vanguard Specialized REIT Index Fund, a mutual fund with 8.8 million shares. Other top institutional investors included Managed Account Advisors with 6.4 million shares, London Company of Virginia with 6.13 million shares, and Epoch Investment Partners Incorporated, which is over 6 million shares. So basically, These corporations own people. I said what I said. They own people. They're slave masters. They're enslavers. Let's call it like it is. Slavery never ended. Instead of having enslavers, we now call them corporations. And they now use their slaves to be on the phone when you're talking to them and trying to book a flight with American Airlines. They're now making some lingerie for your boo thing to Victoria's Secret. They're making the burger patties and those Big Macs and in those Dave's Double and Dave's Single burgers for Wendy's. That's what they're doing. And a lot of people don't realize it. That's the system. And unfortunately, that's also what private equity does. That's part of the problem. And when it comes to trying to purify hip hop back to its roots, those who try to do the best that they can, well, they either are shunned and made more obscure, or they meet their end in a violent way. And this article goes into the history of Tupac Shakur. Here it says, this was the code Tupac and Mopreme had dreamed up in Oakland before the truce meeting took place. They call it Thug Life, and have received help from Mopreme's father, Mutulu Shakur, locked up at Lompoc Federal Prison State, who put it on paper. Mopreme said that the thinking was, if we could just put a governor on the greed and focus on survival, we might save a few lives. It's extraordinary that Tupac was able to facilitate this. He'd only recently arrived in California and did not come from a gang-banging background. But suddenly the hardest gangbangers were enlisting his counsel. Tupac's Black Panther connections, with whom he'd stayed in touch with even after moving away from his mother, helped connect him with the veteran Watts gang members who loved his music and what he stood for. I got people in the penitentiary, big-time OG criminals, calling me, telling me they wanted to lead their movement. Tupac didn't attend to Watts' truce negotiations, but his involvement was critical in facilitating it. And he did attend a treaty with similar goals in Brooklyn, where shot-calling drug dealers from all over New York City, the Bronx, Queens, Harlem, Brooklyn, discussed the Thug Life Code and worked on resolving their differences. They were running the streets on the East Coast back then. Different gangs, different groups, but they're all doing the same ish. There wasn't unanimous consensus, but simply getting everyone to the table was an example of Tupac's extraordinary diplomatic and community building abilities, which he undertook with no fanfare in the midst of an exploding recording and film career. In a move reminiscent of Johnny Cash, Tupac was even performed before inmates at Lompoc. Mutulu hosted the event, in which Tupac, Mopreme, and other rappers at the federal prison in 1993. Mopreme noted that the boys behind bars were particularly glad to see the Pluquet, oh my God, this word, Plucriditunus female R&B group that accompanied them called Y&V. Through the Watts truce eventually petered out, those involved believed it contributed to the dramatic drop in Los Angeles gang violence, which continues today. So, this basically talks about how Tupac Shakur was literally trying to bring back essentially community involvement to uplift ourselves through the gangs instead of a degradation from the gangs. And what happened to Tupac Shakur? So, unfortunately, because of what happened, we end up getting people like Diddy. I said what I said. So this is why I think it's so important to listen to people with KRS-One. Yes, the crap that he did with Eric Adams, of course. Yeah, critique him for that. But his thoughts about the exploitation of hip hop are also very important. I think that it's important for us to keep note of, because it's true. And I think this is why it's important for us to recognize that the issues surrounding capitalism and how it takes what we regard as the struggle and it perverts it so that it keeps us within a system. I think we need to keep this in mind. If you know of somebody who is a rapper, like for instance, when was the last time anybody heard from Lupe Fiasco? Here is a homework assignment I have for you. I want you guys to listen to Lupe Fiasco's Words I Never Said. In fact, I will give you guys the link to that music video. I want you guys to listen to it. And as you guys are listening to it, I want you to think about what's going on in Gaza, as well as what is going on within our country today. That's your homework assignment. Listen to this song. Because if we're going to talk about the purity of hip hop, we're going to listen to people who are conscious about what's going on today. And I think that is something that is good to do. Also, yes, RP George Hashbash, low key is also somebody who's conscious as well. Right? So that is important. Anybody else who has some people to recommend that are conscious, that talk about what's going on from an artistic perspective in hip hop, please make sure to put that in as well. Because I think that's also important.